Hi guys, it's Carrie again doing a virtual lecture, which is actually this is a good one to do virtually because we're going to talk about designers. And I usually wait to do this lecture actually until Bruno, sorry, my dog's bugging me, until we get to She Kills Monsters. But this whole semester is just messed up, so we're actually going to skip to designers right now. Look at this lovely picture of this man thinking. Could he be thinking about costumes, lights, sets, sound, projection, lighting, or props? You're going to want to write down a lot from this lecture, okay? Just so you know, it's a long one. I want everyone to think to themselves. When you see a play or a movie, do you tend to notice A, the scenery, B, the costumes, C, the lights and the sound, or D, won't lie, I don't particularly notice any design elements. Just take a moment. I might ask this question in class in a couple days just out of curiosity because, well, I'm curious. I know for me, I almost never notice costumes, ever. I feel like I notice lights a lot and I notice scenery a lot and sound a lot, but not costumes. Yeah. But just think that to yourself. Like when you first see a play or a movie, what do you really notice? Let's talk about the theatrical designers. Now, in most professional productions, everything you see on stage has been designed by somebody. Here's like a lovely sketch as an example of something a designer sketched out or drew, and then it was in action, right? So we usually have a set designer, a costume designer, a light designer, a sound designer, and now we're getting to a lot of projection designers, yeah, especially for stage and then film's a whole nother thing. You've got editors and God knows what. Yeah. Usually designers specialize in one field. Usually. That's not always the case though. Yeah. It just kind of depends. Where did all these designers come from? The biggest factors that contributed to their rise in prominence, right? So electricity happened. Yay, audiences can finally see. So we need a lighting designer, right? The rise of the modern director led to designers. Once there was someone who was like, I need costumes to look just like this, designers started to happen too. Someone has really always made these decisions, but in the latter like 100 years or so, we've been like specializing in certain people, all right, for those things. Yeah. So what does the designer do? Good question. They design everything, the world of the play, in close collaboration, obviously, with the director. The director gets to veto anything he or she does not like. Some of the first decisions made about the play are in design meetings, right? I meet with my designers weeks before I start rehearsal to talk about what do we want the stage to look like, what kind of worlds are we creating, what's important about this play. Um, Point of no return, why communication is key. What I mean by that is once it's built, I really can't change it, not for a lot of money. So we sketch a lot, right? We sketch out a lot of stuff before we build it. And I'm going to take you guys through an example here in a minute. But we create detailed plans or renderings, stuff like that. And the designs have to either be appropriate for the time and place the play is set in or directly related to the director's concept. So what do we mean by that? King Lear is a lovely example. Okay, the concept was what? Some modern ambiguous kingdom. It wasn't really in a time period other than it was just modern. And so you could see a lot of the like costume design. We had Cordelia like in camo. We had he was surrounded by soldiers in camo. King Lear wasn't in anything ancient in terms of like ancient royal garb, right? He was just in modern attire. Yeah, that was part of the directorial concept. Yeah. Designers are often innovators in their field, right? They come up with a lot of cool stuff. Here's a good example of just like an introductory sketch for a set. Something that's like, okay, this is what we're thinking of doing. Hand it to the technical director, ends up looking like that. Look how similar, how cool is that you can draw something out and then you end up seeing it. Can you guys already see some changes though? You can tell from the first sketch to what they ended up with. There are a couple changes, right? Do you guys see that? The stairs are coming down a different way. Some of these doors are tilted in a little bit more. Yeah, but that's like the basic idea you're going through, right? When is design most and least evident to an audience? It really just depends. I like this. Do you guys remember the difference between a conceptual director and a traditional director? Yeah. Especially with lighting. If we're doing realism, you shouldn't notice the lighting, right? It's realistic. The lighting shouldn't be like, wow, that was such cool lighting. It should be so subtle that you don't even notice it. Whereas in conceptual theater, you might notice it more. Does that make sense? So this slide is, it to me, it totally depends on the play. Realistic theater, you tend to notice it more. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Totally depends on the play, yeah. I feel like if it's a period piece, I do notice costumes more, I will say, especially because costumes are so difficult for period pieces. But it just kind of depends, yeah, um, in terms of that. So here's like importance of being earnest, right? A realistic period piece of importance of being earnest. The box set, uh, we know, what do you guys notice? Yeah, I do notice the costumes a lot. I totally notice the costumes in realism. I don't notice the lights. Do you guys really even notice there even are lights? Yeah, the lights are on. That's about it. That set's really pretty too, but I really notice costumes when it's a period piece. Ooh, here's non-realism. What do y'all notice? Ooh, I notice the floor. I notice the floor. Oh, and all this like side painting shiz. And the lights. I totally notice the lights in this one. Yeah. I mean, we don't see the actors, but anyway. Okay, elements of design. I want you to write all of this down or take a lovely screenshot of this slide. Okay? The designer is an artist and the stage is their blank canvas. These are the tools they can use: line, shape, color, texture, space. All of those elements come together, bring about an emotional response from an audience. Now, this picture that you guys see right here is from a play called Frozen, which is about a serial killer and he's in prison the whole time. And that's the set. It's not a prison cell. It's a frozen background. It's blue. It's jagged. What does that say? All right, so let's come to here. What do you guys notice? Of those 5 elements, line, shape, color, texture, space, what do you notice here? I notice color, especially because that orange god-awful couch is like so different from that background, right? I notice the shape and how they contrast. Color, the lack of lines. Yeah, yeah? What about this one? What do you notice? Oh, I totally notice shape immediately. A square to a circle. I notice color, orange to blue. I do notice texture a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit. Yeah, stones in his pockets. Oh my gosh, that is a brilliant show if you're ever going to see it. Frozen, not to be confused with Disney's Frozen. Serial killer Frozen, different Frozen. But notice line in this one specifically. The jagged line, shapes. I totally noticed texture in this one. Color, obviously. The chairs. Oh, that's a great play too. Oh, I noticed the floor. I'm noticing all these floor treatments. That's fun. Okay, so those are elements of that a designer can use. Now let's talk about spaces, right? Because when a designer designs, they're designing for a specific space. Here are some examples of like theatrical spaces. In that bottom left corner, we'll talk about it in a minute. That's theater in the round or an arena stage. Top left, right? That's a 3/4 thrust. That is my favorite type of stage to block in. I fetching love it. You got a black box in the upper right and a standard proscenium in the lower right. Don't worry about it. We're going to go about it one at a time. So arena stage. An arena stage is that bottom left one. It's kind of a theater in the round where you've got the audience on all sides. Used by the Greeks and ancient humans, and I feel like it's coming back a lot today. People like these. It's kind of fun to be able to see the audience across from you. Football stadiums are arena stage, right? We've seen these before. So thrust. That's that upper left, okay? If you're looking at it, upper left thrust space, where the audience is on 3 sides, okay? It was popular in the Renaissance. As you can see, it's very similar to Shakespeare's globes. This is my second favorite kind of stage to block in. It's awesome. Next is the most standard, which is a proscenium stage, which, if you go back here, it's that bottom right. It's really just like a standard musical stage where like the audience is down here and the play is up there and we are apart from each other. Yeah. Next is alley, which I don't have a picture of as I yawn. I'm so tired. The stage is in the middle and the audience is on 2 sides. It's fun. That's also really fun to block. And think of it like a catwalk if you were going to go see like a fashion show or something like that. I feel like they're not as common in the US, but pretty common in Europe, yeah? Environmental stage. That's a stage that pretty much can take place anywhere. What do I mean by that? I've seen plays in living rooms. I've seen plays in graveyards. I've seen plays in supermarkets. I've seen plays on people's front lawns. Environmental stage is where you find a space and you create a stage, and it's flexible and audience can move during the performance. It just is whatever you need it to be. Last but not least is the black box, which I feel like is mobile, minimal, and the most widely used today because a black box can become anything. You can have audience on 4 sides, you can have them on 3 sides, you can have them on 2 sides. It's basically a big room where you can move the seating to where you want to move it. Yeah, it's kind of nice that way. Okay, next up, I'm going to take you guys through one of my favorite shows I've ever directed and through the design process. This was the biggest design show I've ever done, Rikki Tikki Tavi. Let's go over the plot. Did you guys know the story? I hope you know it. Little mongoose in a garden takes on 2 giant cobras and kills them to save the human family that he loves. Yeah? By Rudyard Kipling, same dude who did Jungle Book. Yeah, I directed it and I adapted it at a children's theater in Florida when I was there. So first thing I start with as a director is I call it pre-production work. Okay, I start with like, okay, who is the author? Who is Rudyard Kipling? What do I think of? What do you guys think of? I totally think of. I love how this transferred. That says writer. The R's messed up. I think of a writer. I think of a novelist. I think of him as a poet. I think of Disney. Why? Because I think of Jungle Book. I also think of colonialism, right? So he's known for Jungle Book, India. He is a white British man, yeah, who was part of the Brits who moved to. He grew up in India, loved India, was definitely a white British man. Think of colonialism, which also makes me think of like white supremacy, racism, Indian-born British man, etc. Yeah. Other productions of Rikki Tikki Tavi. I went back and I like read the original book. Yeah, it's a British family. It takes place in India, but could just about take place anywhere else. It doesn't really feel like it had to be in India, other than it's a mongoose killing a cobra, which can only happen in India. It's really fascinating. I think of the cartoon, and if you guys have seen the cartoon, it's a little racist. It's pretty racist. Basically, the cobras have these really heavy Indian accents, and then everyone else is British. It's a little not okay. I think of the original production, which premiered at Seattle Children's Theater, the Seattle Children's Theater. There's a lovely picture of it right there. Oh, it's adorbs. Yeah. I think of where are we? Okay, we're in a colonial Indian garden. When? Early 1900s. What does that make me think of? Colonialism, India, the East India Trading Company. And then I start thinking of how do I deal with a story that is not mine? I was pretty passionate about keeping it in India because every production, even going back to the original at Seattle Children's Theater, they just kind of set it in any random old garden. But this could never have happened in any random old garden because there was a mongoose that killed a cobra. That could only happen in India. And so rather than continue to culturally appropriate it or whitewash it, I decided to bring the story back to India. And I didn't know how to do that because I didn't know a damn fucking thing about India. So what did Carrie do? I decided to travel to India for an entire summer. I spent a summer out there as a yoga teacher. So here's some pictures of me in India living my best life. It's my favorite place in the world now. That's Varanasi, where people bring their ashes, the ashes of the dead. I got to see it at sunrise. It was pretty awesome. I got to live with my an Indian family. I'm twice the size of all of them, as you can see. And they took me everywhere. They were fetching awesome. I got to see some crazy old statues and temples, and it was amazing. I also even saw a mongoose. That's a video of me chasing a mongoose. We don't have to watch it right now. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. I just am like, oh my God, a mongoose! And I just like chased around a garden. Okay, so basically I knew I wanted to set this story in India. When I think of India, what do I think of? I think of a sacred spiritual place. I think of a colorful place, musical, ritualistic, family, expressive. I am obviously starky, redheadedly white and wanted to get as much help so I could celebrate the culture and not appropriate the culture. And so I reached out to the Indian Association of Tallahassee, and my dramaturg came from them as well as my leading man. My set designer was Ruth. She's an amazing human, and we wanted to base the set off of traditional Indian painting, which, as you can see, is very two-dimensional, flat, right? It's stylized. It's not realistic. Yeah. Here are some examples. Everything is kind of profile too, and we wanted to keep that aspect. Obviously, it takes place in a garden. What do Indian gardens look like? One thing that I love is anytime you go into an Indian garden, you're welcomed by elephants. If their trunks are up, it means welcome. If they're down, it doesn't mean not welcome. I don't know. But so I went to a lot of gardens while I was in India just to get a better idea of how they differ from like Western gardens or whatever. The next thing that happened is we did some sketches. And then my designer makes a model. And as you can see, this is the model for Rikki Tikki Tavi. And hopefully you guys can see this, but everything is two-dimensional. It's completely flat. These vases were flat. These bushes were flat. This was flat, 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 flat. We wanted it to look like an traditional Indian painting. And there's this beautiful border over the top of all of it as well. Next, what does a director think of? They think of the characters. We think of backstories, through lines, journeys, who's my protagonist, who's my antagonist, what are their objectives, their obstacles, what's the structure of the play, the climax, inciting incident, and what are the stakes? AKA, why do I fucking care about the story? Why do people want to watch it? What makes it interesting? Yeah. Let's jump into costume design. The character of Teddy. So it's traditionally the family is a white British family, but I decided to make it an Indian family. And so we decided to make Teddy a little Indian boy. He also spoke Hindi in the play. He didn't speak English. And that was really awesome. Things we know about Teddy are that he is wealthy. Give me a second, y'all. My phone is ringing. I don't know why my phone's ringing. The things we know about Teddy are that I wanted to make him wealthy. I know he's a young child. He's the one who owns the garden, and he speaks Hindi, right? Next, we're like getting into the animal characters, and things I went off of were like, are these animals, or are these animals who dress in like human clothing? And because there's so much wonderful, colorful clothing in India, I did want to use a lot of Indian clothing. So we went with like animals, but who dressed in human clothing kind of thing, yeah. So these are like examples of Bagheera and Baloo from a Jungle Book version that I think just look super cool. We also decided to use puppets for a lot of it too. So several of the characters ended up being puppets, which I had worked with in the past and was super excited about all of it. And I'll show you which ones did. Strong movement, strong physicality. I mean, they're animals. It's a children's show. I want it to be big and boisterous and the kids to have a good time. Rikki! What do we want Rikki to look like? We know she is our protagonist and a baby mongoose taken from his or her home. This is the original sketch. Hey, Nick, I'm making a lecture for class right now. Can I call you back? Okay, you're okay. Goodbye. Sorry, guys. Didn't mean to interrupt our lovely lecture to answer my phone. He's called me like 3 times. Okay, this was the original text or sketch for Rikki. So things I want you to notice: a puppet head, that kind of these dangly traditional Indian necklaces here. The way this sari is wrapped around the waist. Her arms were covered in henna tattoos, and her pants were traditional in that low Indian pant clothing. And I'll show you these henna tattoos in a minute. I wanted her to be able to move, to be scrappy. I didn't really care if it was a boy or girl. The original book, it's a boy, but it doesn't really matter, you know. And as you can see, these traditional necklaces here, Indian necklaces, kind of based off of Lion King, right? That's a Lion King puppet. But yeah, cool stuff. Head puppet. And here's the henna tattoos. This is traditional Indian henna that you wear to like weddings and celebrations. And so we covered her body in henna, and it was really beautiful. And so this was like the final sketch for Rikki. And we'll show you what it ended up looking like. Oh, wait, not yet. So this is Isadora. She ended up playing the role. She is a wonderful actress from Tampa, and she is tiny. She's a 25-year-old woman who looks like she's 10. I've never seen anyone like her in my life. It's amazing. She was adorable. Some more from her later. Nag. So in the book, there's 2 cobras, but in the play that I adapted to, we were just going to do 1 cobra puppet operated by 2 people. right? Two-person character, poisonous cobra, dangerous, old, ancient, lives in the garden. How cool is this? So it's a puppet with two people. So we did a lot of research into like, how do we make a snake puppet, the slithery movement, how can this be effective? As you can see, my second person was kind of the tail. So I cast two dancers. Every time she flicked her foot, it was the tail. And they did their vocalizations. She spoke really high while he spoke down here, and they spoke every line at the exact same time. It was hella creepy. I loved it. This is a snake charmer. So we used a lot of the makeup for traditional Indian snake charmers in the design as well. And same with those pants. And this is for the head of Nag, right? He's the charmer, stuff like that. These are dhoti pants right there. Really cool stuff. And then this is for the tail. So this is for this character here. The tail of Nag, who was female. Caitlin played this role. And her turban was wrapped in like snake stuff like that. It was super, super cool. And she blended into this part of the snake as opposed to him, who was more of the other stuff. Here's some other like images we found in terms of how we could use her as a dancer specifically on point. Really, really cool stuff. And she had a nasally high voice. This was the final sketch. Really cool. And the way she moved was just awesome. It was just awesome. Awesome. And then I cast two dancers. This is Caitlin and this is Christopher. They're both modern dancers from Orlando, and they were incredible together. It was a really cool thing. Darcy the Tailor Bird, entitled Neen, has to be a good singer. I had her singing opera throughout the play. Very possessive of the garden. As you can see, this was the original sketch. It was literally a bird that sat on top of her head like this. How cool is that? She could blink her eyes open and shut. Her wings were attached to the arms here, so when she flapped her arms, she flapped her wings. Ballet physicality, squawky voice. I had a ballerina in the role, so she was prancing all over the place like a bird. It was super, super cool. Here's some other, like, we wanted her to be really colorful, kind of like this, with lots of print. And this was the final sketch. How awesome is that? It was beautiful. And Anna Jane Trenchy played the role. She was a ballerina and an opera singer from Jacksonville Opera, actually, in Jacksonville, Florida, and she was just like killer in the role. Last but not least, we have our cowardly Choo Choo the muskrat. He's a baby, he's sweet, he's hungry, and he's kind of the funny guy all the time. I think of him as like Pumbaa, right, from Lion King. And so he was half hand puppet, half not. As you can see, it was kind of over the shoulder right here. Turned out to be really cool. He's lower class. We kept thinking Avenue Q. I wanted him to have short, stubby legs. So we got dhoti pants with short, stubby legs, waddly movement, scruffy vocals. That was the final sketch. And the Zach Kagan from Sesame Street, he's a puppeteer on Sesame Street, came all the way out from LA to play the role. Just about killed it. I would love to show you guys this. I don't know if it'll ruin the video, so I'm going to try to show you at the end. And if it ends the video, then see what happens. But here are some final pictures. So after months of design before the show even opens, right, this is what we end up with. This is what Ricky ended up looking like. You can see the henna tattoo, the thing on her head, the puppet on her head. These were my musicians. I brought in some people to play some Indian music throughout the show. And they did the opening storm. This is Darcy the Tailor Bird. Look how pretty that turned out. This bird on her head that flapped her wings. Isn't that gorgeous? And this is Nag. Look how cool Nag turned out. Two-person puppet slithering around the stage. And then this is Choo Choo the muskrat. The eggs in the show, we put tiny little light bulbs in them so that when they got cracked, that light went out as if their life force had gone. But you can see how cool that puppet turned out. Super duper cool. Really neat picture of how long Nag was. And it scaled down her leg like that. And you can see a lot of the set too. Do you see how flat it is? We had elephants on stage to welcome them to the garden. A cute little picture of all three of them facing out with the shiny eggs in the middle. And then here's a lovely picture of the set. So these elephants, they welcomed Ricky to the garden. Their trunks even went up. It was super cool. And as you can see, everything is flat. Everything. Really, really beautiful set. I loved working with Ruth on this set. Yeah, here's pictures of me with my cast because they rock. It was one of my favorite shows I've ever done, guys. Literally. Turned out to be so beautiful. And kids loved it. Nag's eyes glowed red when she was angry. and Teddy. Yeah, we got super lucky. It was a really, really adorable show. I really enjoyed it. We decided to name the elephants Stella and Blanche. That's my roommate, Amanda, when I was living in Tallahassee. Cool stuff. I think that's the end. Oh, this is what audience said about it. What a set. The music was spectacular. Best of the year. You don't need to read any of this. I don't care. Okay, we're going to go back and see if we can't watch that video from it. And let's see if it ends the video. And if it does, no big deal. We'll watch it in